I wish you all a good day. I want to tell you a story that took place in Millstone, Kansas in the year 2010, right when the Kansas National Guard had just returned home from their foreign deployment. This is a specific narrative I heard from Sergeant Mason Lee, one of the men I served beside, and I feel compelled to share it with you now. Mason told it plain, like he was setting down a heavy pack he had carried far too long. He said it wasn't really about the conflict. It was about the chairs we leave empty when all the commotion stops. Evening light settled over Millstone like fine dust after a long march. Across the town, 3 separate homes prepared for the same holiday in 3 very different ways. In a small duplex near the edge of town, Corporal Lily Tran straightened her dining table with the precision of inspection day. Her dress blues hung on the chair beside her son's booster seat, the ribbons catching the glow from the kitchen lamp. She set an extra plate, one more than was needed, and paused for a moment, her fingers resting on the cold ceramic rim. Her young boy asked who it was for, and she just smiled without giving him an answer. Across the river, Doc Harris, once a medic in that older foreign conflict, wiped down the same old table he had owned since the 70s. A photo of his former unit leaned against the salt shaker, half the men frozen in their youth, half long gone. He placed a fork beside an empty mug, then reached for his heart medication. Each clink in the dish echoed in the quiet house like a roll call missing far too many names. And downtown, in a cramped apartment above the old barber shop, Ethan Cole sat at his kitchen counter with a box of discharge papers and a bottle of beer. The radio downstairs was playing coverage of the parade. He did not listen. His chair across the table stayed pulled back, completely untouched. The air felt heavy, as if it were waiting for someone who would not be coming. 3 kitchens, 3 clocks were ticking entirely out of sync. Mason said that is how he noticed it first, the particular rhythm. It was like each of them was keeping time with someone who wasn't there anymore. When you have served, he told me, you never really eat alone. You just learn to make room for the silence. The night stretched onward. The plates stayed set. Somewhere outside, fireworks cracked for the parade's finale, and each of them looked up at the sound. Lily from her window, Harris from his porch, Ethan from the dark of his room, each one thinking of a name that no one else could possibly hear. The clock just kept ticking. Mason told me he did not mean to notice them again that week. It just happened, the way you start seeing patterns once your mind has gone quiet. 3 houses, 3 faces he barely knew, all orbiting the same absence. That Thursday, Lily Tran drove to the preschool early. Her uniform still fit, though she had not worn it since the memorial service. On the passenger seat sat a folded letter, creased and yellowing, the last thing her best friend, Corporal Jensen, had written before the convoy went out. She had promised herself she would throw it away one day, but she just could not bring herself to do it. When she parked, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The look was not grief anymore. It was the strange calm that comes after. She pressed the letter flat against her knee and whispered softly, wishing Jen a happy Veterans Day. Then she tucked it back in the glove box and walked her son inside. A few miles away, Doc Harris was trying to fix his push light. He was still wiry for his age, the kind of man who hated asking for help. But his hands shook too much to thread the bulb. His neighbor, a college kid named Lewis, came over holding a ladder. Lewis asked if he was sure he had this. Harris grunted, saying he had to set bones in the dark once, and this was not much harder. Lewis laughed and asked if he ever got tired of the old service stories. Harris did not answer. The light flickered on, a pale yellow ring against the dusk, and for a second the faces from that old photo seemed to glow in the window behind him. He finally said, "Kid, they are not stories if they still talk back at night." He did not join the Veterans Day breakfast the next morning. The invitation sat unopened on his kitchen counter. In town, Ethan Cole had not slept much. He was back at the auto shop where he used to work before the deployment. Every sound reminded him of the motor pool, the whir of drills, the hiss of air hoses, the metallic echo that used to mean safety checks before a convoy. During lunch break, his co-worker slid him a sandwich and asked about Mason, his old squad leader. Ethan just shook his head, saying he could not talk about it. But when he got home that evening, he could not stop thinking about it. Mason had been the one who kept the unit laughing, even when everything fell apart. The one who went back for a missing radio and never made it out. Ethan opened the beer, stared at the empty chair again, and finally spoke aloud. He said, "You should have come home, man." Mason paused when he told me that part. He rubbed the scar on his forearm, his eyes drifting somewhere else entirely. He said, "See, it is not about the ghosts. It is about what you do with the seat they left behind." That night, all three houses carried the same small ritual, though none of them knew the others existed. Lily lit a candle beside the extra plate. Doc Harris poured 2 glasses of bourbon and left one untouched. Ethan turned off the radio and just sat, listening to the clock tick between each heartbeat. The fireworks were long over. The air was still. Mason's voice softened when he told me that part. He said it felt like the town itself was holding its breath. He said, "Maybe that is what homecoming really is. You keep setting the table, even when the seat stays empty." Mason said the turning point came quiet. No speeches, no folded flags, no one meaning to change anything at all. Just 3 people reaching their own edge of silence. That Saturday night, Lily Tran found her son sitting at the table long past bedtime. The candle she had lit had burned low, wax poured like a crater around the wick. He asked who this chair was for again. She hesitated, then said it was for someone brave. He nodded solemnly, then reached for his toy soldier and placed it on the plate, saying it was so they do not miss dinner. That simple gesture hit her harder than the deployment ever had. She turned away, holding her breath as if she had been punched. The toy gleamed in the candlelight, absurdly small, absurdly perfect. Outside, wind pushed at the kitchen window, carrying the faint echo of the parade's drums still echoing from downtown. Lily whispered that Jen was still part of the table, always was. Doc Harris could not sleep. The pain in his chest was steady, not from the heart this time, but somewhere deeper. He sat at the table again, looking at the second glass of bourbon he had poured hours before. He started talking to it, his voice hoarse and low. He asked if Tommy remembered that ridge. God, he was laughing while the sky was falling apart. The room had grown dim except for that porch light outside. He raised his glass and said, "Here is to you, Tommy. I did not bring you back, but I kept the medic bag." He drained it, then knocked gently on the tabletop, the same rhythm he used to check for a pulse. When the porch light finally flickered out, he did not curse it. He just smiled at the dark and said he guessed Tommy heard him. Ethan Cole drove out to the edge of town where the fields started. The moon hung lower, the kind that feels close enough to touch. He brought Mason's old dog tag with him, bent, worn, the numbers barely legible. He sat on the hood of his truck, knees drawn up, whispering to the wind. He said he thought he would make it easier by drinking. He thought the memory would fade. He looked down at the tag, rolling it between his fingers. "But you do not fade. You just wait until I am quiet enough to hear you." He did not cry. He did not pray. He just stayed there until the first light began to creep up over the cornfields, letting the morning find him. Mason paused in his telling. His eyes were tired, but remarkably steady. He said, "That is the part no one talks about. The moment you stop trying to forget, you let the absence breathe. That same morning, 3 chairs across Millstone stood in the same light. Lily's chair held a toy soldier, Harris's had 2 empty glasses, and Ethan's was still facing east toward the fields. The clocks in all 3 homes ticked the same beat for the first time. Mason said if you listened close, you could almost hear it. A heartbeat stretched across generations, slow and even, holding. Mason said the night before Veterans Day felt strange that year, like the air itself was waiting for something. The town had gone still. Flags hung limp. Even the wind seemed to pause between breaths. At her kitchen table, Lily Tran reheated soup for her son and caught herself setting 2 bowls again. Habit, she thought, but her hands did not stop. She lit the same candle, even though the power was back on. The flame bent and flickered, reflected in the photo on the counter of her and Jensen grinning under a desert sun. She lifted her glass of water. She whispered, "To the ones who kept me laughing." Her son copied her, clinking his plastic cup. They drank, and for the first time she did not correct him when he said, "Happy birthday, Mommy Soldier." Across town, Doc Harris buttoned up the old field jacket he had not worn in years. The morning air was cold and sharp. He took the long walk to the diner he had been avoiding. Inside, the place was packed with veterans from different conflicts, all with the same tired eyes. He stood at the door for a moment, then took off his cap. A waitress he did not know guided him to a table. She asked if he was there for the breakfast special. He looked at the empty chair across from him and nodded. He said, "Yeah, but this one is spoken for." The young man next to him chuckled softly, and for the first time in decades, Doc Harris smiled back without flinching. When the food came, he lifted his mug. "To the ones who did not make it home." All around the diner, others did the same. The sound of clinking cups filled the room like gentle rain. On the outskirts of town, Ethan Cole parked near the old grain tower overlooking Millstone. He has spent weeks trying not to join the parade, but something about the morning light made it hard to stay still. He reached into his jacket pocket for Mason's dog tag, then pulled out a second one, his own. He held them together, the metal cold against his palm. When the first marching band horn echoed through town, he raised his hand to his chest. He said quietly, "All right, brother. Guess we are both here after all." He hung the 2 tags from the rearview mirror and drove toward the sound. Mason's voice dropped low when he reached this part of the story. He said that somehow those 3 moments lined up, 3 simple gestures made by strangers who had never met. Lily raising her glass, Doc Harris lifting his mug, Ethan pressing his palm to his chest. Different homes, same hour, same quiet salute. For a heartbeat, he said, it was like the whole town exhaled. The clocks in each house ticked once, perfectly in sync, then fell silent. That is how Mason described it, not as a miracle, not even as coincidence, just the weight of memory balancing itself. He leaned back, looking at nothing in particular. He said, "You serve long enough, you learn. It is not medals or parades that keep people connected. It is the empty chair." Mason said dawn came soft that year. Not the sharp, cold kind Kansas is known for, but something gentler. The kind that makes you believe, for a minute, that maybe the world remembers too. Lily Tran woke before her son. The candle had burned out during the night, a curl of smoke frozen above the wax. She lifted the little toy soldier off the plate and held it in her palm. Its paint was chipped, one arm missing. Still standing, though. She placed it on the windowsill beside the folded flag from her last deployment, where it could catch the morning light. When her boy ran in asking for breakfast, she smiled and told him to set the table, All of them. He grinned, counting chairs like it was a game. The room felt full again. At the diner, Doc Harris was back at his same corner table. The waitress refilled his coffee without asking. Across from him sat Louis, the neighbor kid, yawning through his first cup. "So," Louis asked, "you always keep a chair open?" Harris looked at the seat. "Not open," he said, "just remembered." Outside, a busload of high school band kids marched past, their drums thumping in uneven rhythm. He nodded toward the window. "That sound," he said, "that is what it was like coming home. Messy, loud, alive." He left his tip under the second mug before walking out into the crisp air, humming something from long ago. By mid-morning, Ethan Cole had parked downtown to watch the parade after all. He stood in the back, hands in his jacket pockets, the dog tags glinting faintly under his collar. When the color guard passed, he raised his hand, not to salute, but to steady himself. A kid on the sidewalk offered him a small paper flag. He took it and smiled, saying, "Thanks, partner." The bands moved on, the crowd thinned, and he stayed a while longer. When he finally headed home, he did not take the tags down from the mirror. They swung lightly with the road, catching the sun now and then, two notes ringing in harmony. Mason did not finish the story with an ending. He just said, "That night, somewhere in Millstone, 3 lights burned steady until morning. A candle, a porch lamp, a reflection off a windshield. Different homes, same glow." He took a long breath. He said, "Guess that is how we stay connected. Not through talking, through keeping the chair ready." He looked down, almost embarrassed by the sentiment, and added quietly, "Funny thing is, I do not even remember who first told me that story. It could have been me." And that is how Mason left it, a story about chairs and the spaces between them. Not about what is gone, but what still waits. A heartbeat stretched across time, steady as a ticking clock that refuses to stop.